Aristotle believed that virtue, similarly to beauty, was something that some people are born with and others are not. And as a result of his belief, he said that when you encounter someone who can live outside of society and be a rule unto themselves, he said of those people that they are either a beast or a god. And it was actually for this reason that he believed that democracies were a fundamentally unstable form of government. He said that the purpose of government was to pass on the virtues of a leader, of a born virtuous leader, to the people that followed him. But in the case of a democracy he viewed it as a holding pattern, a waiting period where there was no such beast god around, and so you had to just hold off having a powerful leader to pass on virtue. Now, I think people like George Soros actually agree with this, and in his book in defense of the Open Society, which is a defense of Karl Popper's book, The Open Society and Its Enemies, both of which I've read. He makes the case that's being made is that since we don't know after Hitler whether a leader is going to be a beast or a god, we can't allow strong leaders to have dominance. And this has led to the rise of universal democracy across everywhere that the United States and its allies can reach. As there was this deep-seated belief that strong leadership, kingship, was by its nature dangerous and therefore to be avoided. Realistically speaking, the reason why you can't choose a strong leader and differentiate between a beast and a god is that you don't have something to compare that person with, right? And this is something that I, as a Christian, think that we actually have something, which is the reason for the great chain of being in the Middle Ages was that the comparison is with Christ, right? So there is a method for determining who is a beast and who is like a god, as in who is like Christ. And that's the system by which in the medieval eras kings were supposedly chosen. Obviously that became very corrupt, but there's a new, whether you think that I'm correct about Christ or not, there's a new phenomena happening, which is that we've been in this holding pattern of democracy for so long without selected leaders to crack down, that the return of kingship is almost inevitable, that strongman leaders will be returning, whether they're beasts or gods, because there's a vacuum, that there's in this holding pattern, there's a breakdown of virtue slowly over time. We're not building any, and so there's a breakdown slowly over time. And as that occurs, the need for strong leadership, a ruler, increases, because even a leader who is a beast, in fact, instills discipline, instills pagan virtues, even if they do horrendous things at the same time. And so it's actually essential to the fabric of all human society that they control societies at some point in time. It's not only inevitable, it's necessary for these powerful individuals to take control. And I'm not necessarily saying that that's happening in the United States, but it's definitely happening in places like El Salvador, where the breakdown of human relations is to the point where democracy can't hold together anymore. And so the result is they need someone strong to enforce a form of virtue, whether you agree with it or not. That's what they're getting, and that's what a lot of places are going to be getting. And the old ruling class, the ones that agreed with George Soros and his ilk back in the day, in the post World War II era, they're all aging out. They're getting old. Joe Biden was one, and I think Kamala Harris is attempting to take the mantle, and she's pretty young for taking the mantle of it. She didn't live through what they lived through, but most young people are not very interested in a democratic solution. They actually want to go a different way, and they don't, any of them agree on what way that is, but almost all of them rely on the imposition of some format of virtue over top of the society. Because if you don't have that, then the society falls apart, which also inevitably leads to enforcement of virtue codes in societies. It's just that the societies that it's enforced in are smaller. If the United States breaks down into the separate states, then you don't have one dictator for the United States. You have 50 dictators, one for each state. That's how it would work. If we don't have the goodwill between the states to remain together, then we'd end up with many separate dictators. But the dictators are coming, as are the kings. That's what we have to look forward to, because we've allowed the level of virtue to degrade to such an extent that there's no way around it at this point. And there's almost no one left who's fighting to keep democracy alive. I don't know if there is actually a solution whereby we can keep democracy alive, but I very, very deeply doubt it, since the democracy that we've been running under since World War II uses debt systems to supplement trust, right? So if trust is the thing that erodes when virtue erodes, we're using debt to substitute for virtue, and then we're using debt to substitute for the trust, which is a substitute for the virtue, right? Which is standing in for the virtue. And the result of all of this debt is, if we don't find a way to substitute for the debt, then the system breaks down, because there isn't enough trust in the system to keep the debt system alive, which I think is exactly what Donald Trump is actually seeing. And so in order to attempt to save the United States from that trouble that's going to be going on globally, what he's attempting to do is pull back all of the U.S. trust to the U.S., let the rest of the world do its thing, and save the American democracy. I don't know if it's going to work. I have no idea, but I think that's his project.